All right, we just posted our exercise 1. So if we follow our course outline, you'll see that we have done what we needed to, getting exercise 1 turned in. You have until 11:59 tonight, the day it's due, where it's read in the course outline, to get something in and not miss the deadline. And now we're going to start our next exercise, exercise 2, which will be due next class. And so that's in Unit 3. The demo topics today and the lecture today is not just about compositing layers and digital image mining, though we reviewed that from last class. It adds talking about shapes, fonts, composition, and graphic design. So that's really broad. Now, shapes are different than lines. And that is what exercise 2 is about. We're going to be layering up and compositing with vector shapes instead of raster lines. Fonts, which is actually the wrong word for it, but it's a word everyone knows for it. The real word is typefaces, right? Typefaces, like you see here, making up each of these letters, these are actually vector shapes. How do I know? All of these letter forms, even this little spiral arrow, all of these are vectors, because no matter how much I zoom in on them, I never see their pixels. Does that make sense? So at every size, they are perfectly clean. Even all the type from my PDF here. So that's how we're relating to fonts or typefaces. Composition is how we organize elements, just like we did to make our jumble. Do we want them all on separate places, or do we want them overlapped? Do we want them central symmetrical? Do we want them dynamic? That has to do with how things are arranged on a space. And we're going to be using a similar 8x10 kind of space for our vector shape exercise. And then graphic design is being able to control the placement of those images and vectors, often type, right, to go along with images to have the composition and the eye movement we want. So we're going to build on the skills from the last exercise with this. And so for that, we go to unit modules and we go to the vector shapes. So what is the only vector you're seeing here? This is all pixel based. If I zoom in enough on my animation, I will see pixels. On this thing, that's all pixels. All of these are pixelated. But the letter forms, those are vectors. Because letter forms are vector shapes, just like we're going to be creating. And they don't change. You don't see the pixels. So Unit 3 introduces us to vector shapes. We see past student examples. What is a graphic image that's like a typeface that we use a lot in today's communication? Emojis, right? How is an emoji different than a capital letter T? It often uses color, right? It might be emotional, but there are T's that might be emotional too, right? So color is a big aspect. So we're not only going to be playing with shapes, because T is a shape, right? But we're going to be playing with layering those different shapes of different colors on top of each other. And that's what gives us emojis. The deliverable, I'm just going to speed through it, but you can introduce yourself and take it more slow. The deliverable is just going to be exercise 2. There's nothing else to it. So we're going to see some past examples. Bum, 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 bum. I used to do this project where we took a painting from history. So in this case, James Montgomery Flagg's first I Want You, poster illustration for World War II. And then we converted them all into vector shapes. It's a great exercise. It was just a little bit more involved than we had time for as an intro to vector shapes. So emojis was a way to simplify that. Because emojis tend to be simpler shapes, right? We are going to start not with our sketchbook, though you will want your sketchbook for next class, because our first assignment you'll start by drawing something. But we're going to sketch our emoji, even though it will be our own custom emoji, we're going to sketch it first with this really low rent website that allows you to make kind of paper cutout emojis from preset options. That will be our starting point. And in this example, I stayed really close to that starting point. But what we're going to do is use that as inspiration and then recreate it using vector shapes on our own. Not using all the vector tools, just using vector shapes. You can see the vector shapes, the circles, the horns, the eyebrows, because they're all outlined in blue there. right? That's how a vector is distinct. It's made with paths instead of pixels. And then we can also fill those not just with flat color like they are here, but with gradients, textures, patterns, and effects to really get kind of dynamic emojis, not just flat graphic emojis. But flat graphic would meet all of the criteria as well. What is your inspiration going to be? It should be something. You need a theme in mind, right? And the default is to use the same theme you used for exercise 1. So if it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you might want to do an emoji of Willy Wonka, or an emoji of Charlie, right? Or an emoji of a chocolate bar. You kind of decide. Yeah, just one. Yeah, just one. So this one, for instance, is from The Lord of the Flies, which is a book where a pig's death features prominently in the story. So that's what they focused on. Emojis, of course, can show emotion, but emojis could also just be general symbols for ideas, thoughts. And I thought this was kind of a fun example. You take these complex 3D real-life things, like this stop-motion puppet from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Ranker and Bass Christmas special, and if you want to make it into a graphic, emojis function in a different way, in a more symbolic way, with clean shapes. This is used in professional work all the time, especially for illustrations, and especially for web and print campaigns where something needs to be printed consistently. Flat graphics like this with vector shapes are very popular. There's been a movement, you could also see it in pop art, but there's been a movement to then add a little bit more subtlety to it with something called Flat 2.0, where you take the flat graphic design first and then you add styles to it, which will be our optional bonus for this project, which would be things like drop shadows, gradients, that kind of thing. But that's not required. So what we're going to do first, and this is all you need to get done today, is click on this program, which isn't even in our links, because we only use it right now for about most 10 minutes. And it's called Emoji Maker, Flat Icons. We're all required to start with this. This is not a complex tool, but it's a good metaphor for how vectors work. When you make a Word document, you choose a typeface, right? Like Times New Roman, Chicago, Helvetica. And then you have to choose letters, and you make your words, right? And you can make the words bigger or smaller. But basically, those letters are preset. You can't change the way they're shaped. That's the same way here. So go ahead and start by clicking on the little randomizer. And you'll see that this can generate a lot of emojis. But all of these emojis are just like different words made from the same preset vector shapes. Layered up. Ooh. And maybe you get to one that's a good sketch for what you want to do just by doing this. So I'm doing Greek mythology. And I was thinking maybe do Zeus, you know? Is there anyone that's close to Zeus? Not so far. But maybe I can just build it myself, right? Now what's interesting about this is you can layer up a lot of things. So to start fresh, just click on the trash can. Vectors always start with a simple basic shape at the base. Think of it like cutting shapes out of construction paper and then making paper dolls. So for this first layer, you have to pick, and these are your only options. What is your base? And the only base I would say definitely do not use is this ghost, because this is a poor example of graphic design. The ghost is the exact same color as the background, so you can't see it at all. But luckily, these others are a little bit darker. So it might be fun to do a skull for Hades, you know, if I'm doing Greek myths. If I'm doing Zeus, maybe I do the Santa with a beard. But unfortunately, Santa's beard is not that different than the background, right? Or maybe I do something that just shows divinity, you know, with a halo. So what would be fun? Or maybe I do kind of a demon, right? And turn that into Hades or something. Like, it's completely up to me. But I have to pick one of these. And this is not lock me into what my end product will be, but this starts the process. This is like a sketch. So maybe I'll start with, the skull. Okay, next, you can click on the categories at the bottom. The base is the only one that you can only choose one of. All of these you can layer up, and there's more than what you see. You can scroll. So, skull eyes, right? These are fun. And it would be great if I could then make those bigger or move them around. But I can't. This is a simple program. But what I could do is layer other ones on top of it to kind of get a sense of what I'm going for. And you can turn them on and off. And whatever one you click last is going to be the one that shows up on top, just like cutouts of paper. I like that. That's spooky and intense. I don't think I want anything on top of those. But if I did want to turn off some of these, you'll see that they turn dark gray when you select them. And so when you deselect them, but then if you select them again, you say, no, I really do want it, then they show up on top. So you want to kind of play around with it, find the ones you want to keep and the ones you don't. And it doesn't matter if it's symmetrical or not, but I think that's what I'm going to keep from the eyes. Now I move on to the next, the mouths. And they're not just mouths, there's other things too. Now a skull doesn't have a mouth so much, so I can choose not to use anything. But I can also play with different things, right? And all of these are just made of simple, flat shapes. Some more complicated than others, but there's no gradients in them. There's nothing that complicated. I kind of like that. Because Greek mythology was not nice to everybody. Right. Oh, I know what. Ooh, it's perfect. So it's going to be about the afterlife, right? Greek mythology. So it's going to be a skull with its tongue sticking out, looking really shell-shocked. But then what am I going to put on top of the tongue if it's Greek mythology? A coin. Woohoo. Now, do I have a coin option here? I do not. Maybe there's something that can remind me, but I can just remember that. So I can put that there, and then when I actually replace it, I can make it a coin. There is this, yes. Would that communicate in the same way? No. But yeah, it just goes for what kind of emotion, what kind of symbol do you want to create. So in Greek mythology, you are buried with a coin under your tongue to pay passage across the river Styx. And if you don't have that, you're never allowed into the afterlife. There's different versions, but yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so Western civilization all ties back to ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, the Egyptians to some extent, right? And so you'll see variations of these customs, right? The idea of currency into the afterlife to help your soul pass. And you can have fun with it. All right, the next feature are accessories, right? Can really confuse my theme. Yeah, they could be sunglasses. Here I have a little skull nose, actually, if you're looking for that. They added this for COVID, which was nice. So see if any of those appeal to you. Now, once you have it, I'm trying to decide if I want, I'll do something like this. I think now